Hey, I'm Randy Parmer, and today on Coffee and Conversation, I am here with Brad Riley. He is a minister, an author, a counselor, and he has written a book, and that book is entitled A Presence in the Dark, Finding Hope in Death. Brad, man, thank you for taking the time to come out and to join me today on Not So Crazy Talk. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it is a great privilege to be here with you. We worked together years ago in the same church, and I just love being back with you. Thank you for having me.
Same here. We were so blessed, so fortunate, man, to the church we worked at, Wichita First Church of the Nazarene, and to be part of the ministry there. It was just a special time in my life.
Amen.
As we were talking earlier, you mentioned about finding hope in death, and
right,
you have written a book, and I'm anxious to read the book myself.
Yeah.
And one of the things that spoke to me was you were saying how that you yourself, God's opened up the door. You have performed thousands of funerals. That is a ministry that God has opened up for you. And as someone who's done funerals, I know there's only a small amount of things that you can say during that service time.
Right.
But there, when you look out and you see the brokenhearted and you see people suffering, there is so much that you want to be able to say to them.
Exactly.
And you've taken the time to put this into book form, something that you said you could hand to them and pass on to them. So could you tell us, man, thank you again, could you tell us about what the book entails?
Yeah, thanks for that, Randy. Just asking me those questions, giving me the opportunity to talk is just so appreciated. I never knew that I would be so involved in the death, the thought of death and the culture of death as a minister of the gospel. We think about life and giving new life. And somehow God just kept drawing me back into more and more funerals. And I realized at some point that this was my ministry. This was my opportunity to really show the love of Jesus Christ to people hurting at their lowest time. Mm-hmm. And I really prayed for, over time, there was so much I wanted to say that I couldn't say in that short window, that I really prayed for God to give me the words to put into a book. And that's what this is, the first attempt to put into words what I want to share with people that would help them see beyond death, to see that there is hope, that death is truly a doorway that we all must pass through. I say that a lot. Death is a doorway we all must pass through. It's our common denominator. Every person will die at some point. And so we have that in common. And it doesn't matter who we are, what we do, where we've been, how much we have, we're going to die. And so I'm in seeking to help people find some hope in the midst of their sadness, in the midst of their grief. That's where I began with this book. I started at that point and then began to kind of turn the conversation away from just grief. So it's not a book about grief counseling. It's really not a book. There's a lot of books out there on the 5 or 7 steps of grief, or those kind of things. But this is, or the stages, not the steps, but this is really a book that tries to get them thinking about life. Why are we here? Who is God? What do we do with this life and how we live? And it matters how we live as to how we die. So that's kind of where I took it.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. The first part.
Yeah.
How we live. What is life? Why are we here?
Yeah. I love that. I love, Randy, I'm kind of a pop music philosopher or theology major. I'm not a theologian of any kind unless I'm just a pop music theologian. But I quote the words of those sage philosophers from my youth, Seals and Crofts. They said, life, so they say, is but a game, and then we let it slip away. Love, like the autumn sun, should be dying, but it's only just begun. Like the twilight in the road up ahead, we don't see just where we're going. And all the streets of the universe whisper in our ears. All the years come and go, takes us up, always up. We may never pass this way again. There's a thought. We got one shot at life.
Right.
We're not going to pass this way again. And every moment we live, that moment's gone. And we don't know how many moments we'll have. So my goal, and I turned this book in the second chapter after I talked about the experience of my own brother's death and that being the common denominator really hitting me in the face. I turned this book to talk to people about life is so precious. What is it? And I try to honestly answer that question. You know, that's the big philosophy argument over all religions. So what's the meaning of life?
Yeah.
And I really do try to answer that in this book. And I think the answer to that question really is, Randy, is this. I'll just read it to you, just a little tiny excerpt here. It says this. It says, the way I see it, there's only one answer that makes sense at all. The meaning of life is to realize that no matter what happens to us in this world, whether we're raised in a loving home with two loving parents, or if we were left on the streets as an orphan, nothing seemed to go right for us. Our life has meaning because we aren't living it in and of ourselves. To live in this life is to participate in the life of God. Wow. Then I begin to talk about the fact that every living being is alive because it has the breath of God.
Amen.
The minute that breath is withdrawn, there is death. But so to live in this world, here's the really cool thing. To live in this world, because people live in this world and they get to a point where they can, what did my life mean? What did it add up to? And they look back on it with sadness sometimes. But here's the good news. To live in this world, even if it's only for a few breaths, a tiny baby with a few breaths, or whether it was 100 years old, to live in this world is to live in the next world. To live in this world is to live in the next world. Of course, it matters how we live in this world as to how we'll live in the next world.
Right. Yes.
So life is about the breath of God. It's about being and carrying the image of God in this world.
Amen.
And there's a whole lot with that to unpack.
Yeah. I love the song that talks about it's His breath, in our lungs.
Yeah. It's His breath in our lungs, and we pour out our praise. I love that song.
I do too, man. And it gives such perspective that, you wake up. I was in a Bible study this morning, and they were saying, "Oh, hey, so-and-so, it's good to see you." And they're like, "Yeah." And they mentioned to another person there, they woke me up this morning. And a couple ladies looked at him like, "Really?" Like, no. But they're like, because their point was, God woke you up.
That's it.
So that was cool. So you talk about why we are here, what is life, and life is that, this relationship with God that we have, and the importance of it. And you talk about death finds everybody. That the way you said that earlier in a prior conversation, I thought, "Ooh, that's true, man."
Yeah.
We can hide, we can do all these things, but death finds everybody.